Good afternoon, everyone. The time is now 2:05, and I call to order the meeting of the Orange County Sewer District Number 1 Advisory Committee. A copy of the agenda for this meeting may be found on the county website under the tab for the legislature. Please silence your phones and electronic devices. And at this time, I ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Carrie, could you do a roll call, please?
Benelli, President Amo.
Here.
Cheney.
Here.
Trudell.
Here.
Ellers.
Here.
Tui.
Great. Here. All right, first up, before I call everybody up, I just wanted to bring it to light. It's hard to believe, but this committee was formed a little over 4 years ago. And it's incredible. And a tremendous amount of work and research and due diligence has gone into this. And, we're kind of moving along. And I just would like to kind of see us get back on that track, because I know we keep getting thrown curveballs and things, and DEC sends back and they want this and that and extra things. So just want to remind everybody, I'm available to meet with anybody individually, as a group. And let's just go right into the meeting then. But again, thank you to everybody. I mean, pretty much most of us have been around since March of 2019. And made tremendous progress. I want to keep that momentum up. So thank you, everybody. First up, we have Rich Golden, County Attorney, Joseph Mahoney, Esquire, Senior Assistant County Attorney, Eric Denenga, Commissioner, Department of Public Works, Bob Gray, Deputy Commissioner, EF&S, Anthony Griffin, Principal Sanitary Engineer, Department of Public Works and EF&S. And last but not least, Mary Beth Bianconi, Partner, Delaware Engineering, DPC. You guys can join us up here at the table. Cheers. I also want to recognize that we have Gedalia Zegadin with us, also in the audience, and
Michael Zwart.
Michael
Zwart.
Jordan.
Zwart, C-W-A-R-T.
Okay. Nice to have you.
He's assistant engineer, principal, assistant sanitary engineer.
Okay, great.
Michael works with me and
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
All right, first up, we just to kind of get us on track, let's go through the usual list here. We got the facility plan. Mary Beth, do you want to kick things off? And we don't necessarily have to go in this order if you don't want to. You can pick and choose except for number D.
Okay, so, no, I'm just looking at, I'm cheating and looking at your agenda.
Oh, no, that is.
So I think relative to the facility plan, really kind of the news on that is this document that you have that kind of has our little red Death Star ball at the top of it. Yes, it's either that or it's the AT&T thing. Folks may recall at the last meeting, Mr. Zekadin brought up that there was a due date for the state's Clean Water Revolving Fund, which is a source of financing for water and sewer projects statewide. It's one of the most prominent sources of low-cost financing and has some associated grant programs with it that generally runs on a federal fiscal year. So it starts on October 1st, ends on September 30th of every year. Because the money for that program begins as federal dollars, the federal government requires that all of the states publish something called an intended use plan, an IUP, that outlines how they intend to administer the program in conformance with the state, with the federal regulations in the state, and how they will use the money. So actually what projects will be funded and at what amounts, and then in which categories. There are categories for small communities, medium-sized communities, New York City, there's categories for green infrastructure projects, variety of other things. The state has had a number of different methods at which they have accepted listings for projects on that intended use plan. The current method is through something called the PLUS system, which is an online registry, the project listing and update system is what PLUS stands for. We had a discussion here at our last meeting about filing a listing so that the county's contemplated project would be considered for scoring and for potential future funding through the SRF program. This doesn't commit anyone to do anything, but what it does is open the door for you to consider future financing, possibly through the SRF program. It also gives you an indication as to how competitive your project may be relative to others. It's the way the program works. There's a fixed amount of money that's available every year for leveraged financing. The state actually takes that amount of money. They create a list of projects that are prioritized based on scoring, which has to do with environmental quality, water quality restoration, a number of other factors, including social and economic factors. They rank the projects based on scoring. And then they literally say in a given category, if it's small communities, here's the amount of money that's allocated to small communities. Here's the first most highest priority project. It needs $1 million. And they start subtracting until they basically run out of money. They actually kind of keep going because not every project is financed in every round. So there was a discussion here about listing the Harriman project, which folks will remember is a combination of upgrading the Harriman wastewater treatment plant from 6 MGD to 9 MGD, and also including that ability to expand that plant even further upwards of perhaps as much as 20 MGD in the future, as well as some upgrades to the lower interceptor, which is the path through which most of the wastewater that comes to the Harriman wastewater treatment plant is delivered. That combination of project costs, including all of the soft costs and inflated out for the several years in the future that it would be bid, is somewhere around $200 million. That's the number that we've been discussing. So on last Friday, on June 16th, it was actually on Thursday, the project was listed with the state for ranking and scoring and potential future financing. The packet that you have in front of you is just the cover letter. So what we did, and this is relative to the facility plan, is we used the facility plan as the basis for this filing. The facility plan, as you all know, includes an enormous amount of really technical information and a lot of alternatives analysis, far actually beyond what this program really requires that you do in terms of the technical analysis. However, there were a number of factors that are required for listing a project that were not incorporated in the facility plan, because the facility plan is a technical document and the listing documents are a little bit broader because they do take into account that social and environmental factor that I discussed earlier. So the cover letter here, we had a discussion with the EFC to say, we spent a lot of time and money on a facility plan. Rewriting that and compacting it down, as you guys remember, the facility plan is about 3 inches thick, compacting it down to a tiny little skinny report that just narrowly addresses the criteria of this program would take a lot of time and effort, and it doesn't seem like it would be productive. EFC agreed with that, and they said, we're okay with that, send us a cover letter that tells us where in the documentation that you're providing our information that we're looking for can be found, and to the extent that that information is not in the facility plan, because again, the facility plan had a different purpose, add the information that wasn't included. So that's what the attachments are, is an overview of the information that was required for the listing. You'll see that it includes, again, some environmental resource information. It includes a lot of the information regarding total dissolved solids and chlorides that's drawn from the variants and from other places, because that's an important part of the story here. There is a discussion as well regarding floodplains, something called potential environmental justice areas. You'll see there's a map with lots of purple blobs on it. That's important when we consider the social factors that are involved in scoring and ranking these projects. And there is a consideration in this program for those who have the ability to pay versus those who are going to be stressed to pay for a needed project. And so this mapping in part shows that a good portion of the service area of the Harriman treatment plant and the lower interceptor, including the district itself, as well as its neighboring municipalities that are served, are in what are considered to be environmental justice areas. This is an important area for scoring. There's also a very brief statement on financial status in here. We had a discussion with EFC regarding needing to dive a little further into the financial status with relative to ability to pay, and they did agree that that could be a down the road discussion for consideration with this project. So we put an overview in this document because it is obviously, as we know, kind of complex. We have a district, we have service areas, all of these things. There's a certification of the report. And then the last thing is something called a smart growth assessment, which is a filing that is required for this program as a result of an executive order. So relative to the facility plan, its most recent go-around is being used to list the project for scoring and ranking on the intended use plan for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And I'll conclude by saying that the way that is going to play out, so listings were due for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and for applications for financing, so projects that are ready to actually pull the trigger on receiving money, all due last Friday. The Environmental Facilities Corporation will be taking all of that information into consideration and preparing a draft intended use plan for federal fiscal year 2024, which will start on October 1st of this year. That draft plan will be a public document that will be subject to public comment. That should be released sometime, ideally in August. And we will make sure that we apprise you when that is released, and so we can see how this project ranked and scored. And then we can talk about, at that time, that document is always subject to comment, if we want to comment. For instance, if we look at the scoring and we think there are some points that we should be assigned that we didn't receive, we can comment at that time. In an ideal world, the final intended use plan for fiscal year 2024 is issued on October 1st. Historically, the state has had some challenges with getting that to happen on time. In the last year or two, they have been very prompt. And that will kind of set the stage as we close out the environmental review process, and you all think about what the next steps are in this process, a large part of which will be lining up financing for the lion's share of the construction work that has to be done. And so that will be something that will help feed into that process, consideration for other grant applications. And as we discussed on a number of occasions, Attorney Mahoney has pointed out, this proceeding is subject to county law, where we'll have a process to go through with public hearing for the expense associated with the project. And so those things are all future, but this sets us up for that.
Okay, Mary Beth, I just have a quick question here with the financial status. You've got the 3 villages, and then mentions the portion of the town of Monroe. Is that only those elements are looked at, or also the movement of communities, as you mentioned, the outside community? Or doesn't the financial status apply to them as well?
That's a great question. So this financial status is relative to the Orange County Sewer District number 1, which is the 3 communities plus a portion of the town of Monroe. That's how the district was created back in 1972, something like that. So that's what's represented here. As you pointed out, we do have the outside users, the satellite communities, the movement communities, whatever we want to call them. EFC is certainly aware that those exist. As we go down the road, they will be requesting copies of intermunicipal agreements, those kinds of things, and that will be taken into consideration. But as I mentioned, this is a complicated situation, so we asked EFC that we could submit this information because it represents the district. And then as they continue their review, they should be reaching out to say, okay, what is there's additional information that can be considered here. Let's talk about what that additional information is.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions before Mary Beth continues? Okay, yes, Chairman.
Sorry. So along the lines of the movement communities, when does it become appropriate to look at those I mean, obviously, look at those contracts, but I think they will probably need to be brought up to date and revised. When should we be anticipating getting into that portion of the project?
I don't think it's early to address that issue at all. I think we'll be looking at that likely by the end of the year. We'll be looking, I'll bring up that issue and as to updating and addressing the current contract as it exists.
Peter, you have to tell.
Excuse me?
You have to
Oh,
tell.
get down here, I'm sorry.
There's also a July 28th
Yes.
deadline.
There is.
Can you, okay,
I can.
Thank you.
So the July 28th deadline, which is for another set of grants, is really kind of talk about it broadly. There's really two different things happening. One is the consolidated funding application process is moving forward. That is the state's process for the last 11 or so years, where they, instead of having every agency that offers grants for any different thing, going out there and doing this on their own, the state has put them kind of all in one application location to make it easier for communities to, and other nonprofits and other people who can apply for these, to apply for those grants. So that's one side. There isn't really a grant program in consolidated funding application for this project. It's just the grants say this is the specific thing this is for, so there isn't one there. There is something called the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, which is directly related to this project. Those are grants for water systems and sewer systems to make capital improvements, very much along the lines of what is contemplated here for the Harriman project. The eligibility requirements for the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act include having an engineering report. Check, we've got that. Having secret completed, we're in the process, but we don't have it finished and we're not gonna have it finished by July 28th. Having all your intermunicipal agreements that are going to fund the project in line. Question was just asked by the chairwoman, when are we getting to that? And the attorney responded, in the fall. So we will not have that done by July 28th, and that's okay, this is all okay. We have to have clearance from the State Historic Preservation Office for the project. So that's it's a documentary process. Since everything that we're doing is in lands that are previously disturbed, I don't anticipate that that's going to be a problem, but that is part of the process, part of the EIS process as well. So again, it's all bundled together. It's not going to be done by July 28th. And then last thing is you have to have your GAP financing in place. These programs don't fund 100% grant of projects, even little itty bitty ones. They're all percentages. So in the case of a project of this nature, that would be having adopted a bond resolution that was subject, if necessary, to permissive referendum and a estoppel period. The adoption of a bond resolution cannot occur until seeker has been done, because the adoption of a bond resolution is a seeker action. And it also, in the case of the county, cannot be done until it's 5A, right? County 5A, county law 5A proceeding has been completed, which involves an engineering report, which again we have, but conduct of a legal proceeding where there's a public hearing and there's a procedure that the county attorney's office has to follow, which I would say takes several months at least to
I would
get
say
through.
5 or 6.
So it's a 5 or 6 month process. So that all being said, while there is a due date on July 28th for this Water Improvement Act, Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant funding, this project is not positioned, does not meet the eligibility criteria this year. That program has been renewed every year in the state budget since 2015, when it started. It's a very popular project, a very popular program, and is well supported by the legislature. So I would fully anticipate that hopefully this time next year, we'll be in a position to where we'll have those things done and we can apply for that program.
Thanks. Yes, get down, follow.
just to follow up. I understand that there's part of funding from the Environmental Bond Act and the bipartisan infrastructure, which will be grant funding for the these type of projects. Is that what you refer to?
They all still have those same criteria.
On the intermunicipal agreements that you mentioned, I just want to correct the record so we have enough lawyers here. We do have all intermunicipal agreements between the district and all the Moody communities. You're referring to modifying those agreements, but there are contracts in place that for purposes of grant submission, it could be submitted as is.
Yeah, it could be, the one footnote I will add is that, with respect to those agreements, I believe that most of them are historic. They go back many years. So one of the things that when the Environmental Facilities Corporation is looking at, financing a project like this, they want to know what are the sources of revenue that are going to pay back the debt. That's an important question. That's what any lender, if anyone here sits on a bank board, that's the question you're always asking, right? If you're going to give someone money, what's their ability to pay it back? So, Attorney Mahoney's observation that we should be looking at this fall makes a lot of sense because the bonding for these projects is long-term, it's generally 30 years. The Environmental Facilities Corporation, if these contracts are a substantial amount of the funding that supports the repayment of the debt for some reason, they're going to be saying, well, we need to make sure that the term of those agreements in some way approximates the term of borrowing. So even though we have these agreements in place and they could be submitted as part of an application, I would fully anticipate that one of the questions that would be asked would be, okay, what's the term of these agreements? Do we have an agreement in place going forward so that we know if we're relying on, repayment of debt from users that are not in the district, in the sewer district, which is a taxing jurisdiction, do we have reason to believe that those payments would continue throughout the life of borrowing? So it's really, while yes, we have those agreements in place, that's something that we have seen in many financings is that having agreements that cover and contemplate that going forward payment is important as well.
But those historic agreements were okay in 2006 when the county issued a bond to EFC to build the first edition. So there's no reason to believe if they were satisfied in 06, that they would not be satisfied in 2026 or 25.
Pretty confident they will not be satisfied because the terms aren't long enough. It's just a term issue, right? It's a term issue, and if there were any exclusions in there, or I don't know, you've looked at these agreements many times. So it's not, I don't think we see that as a hurdle. We see that as a good part of the process moving forward.
Right, I anticipate there'll be substantial discussions
Yes.
and there may be some concerns that we'll have to address it.
Yeah, sure.
And of course, that's all irrelevant if we end up with a bond. Of course, the goal is to end up with a grant. We don't need to repay anything, so.
That would be ideal. I'm
And
not
that's
aware
why,
of
and that's why
$200 million
applying,
projects that are grant funded, but.
that's why applying for the grant should be the first test. And then you decide if you need to modify the agreements. You may end up not needing to modify the agreements whatsoever.
So I guess
think
what I would
that
say
we-
is all
I
things
think
in their
that
time.
Those agreements need to be looked at.
Yeah.
Those old IMAs in all respect. There's some ways to tighten them up just to kind of get a new, fresh look at them. And then I'm sure that they'll fall into place where they'll fit into this model here. So, okay.
And I wasn't questioning looking at agreements. I just didn't want to make it subject to progress.
No.
Progress needs to be made. The agreements need to be reviewed. Those are two parallel tracks. They're not interacting.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question, when you're doing the municipal agreements and it has to do with bonding, you're talking about, how do you project out 30 years whether there's not gonna be more people coming in, wanting to be part of it, somebody changing their plan to get out? How do you factor that in? I mean, it's not the same as it's today, 30 years from now, somebody may
You base the
change.
cost on, there's a variety of different costs that can be included. One is obviously capital improvements, one is the O&M costs. However, if you have an outside user looking to increase capacity, the amount of capacity that they're allowed to utilize, there would be a third cost option in terms of an additional capital cost, and based on the overall cost of the project. Obviously, that would follow the schedule associated with the bond, payment schedule associated with the bond.
Are these bonds, revenue bonds, going to be an obligation from the participating municipality to obligation to pay? And
In my experience, most of these bonds are general obligation bonds.
they are,
They are mostly geo bonds. That's my experience, even working with counties with Rensselaer,
I didn't
Saratoga.
hear you, you said they are obligation.
They are geo bonds, yeah, that's the way they work. I think the important thing to know about the agreements are provide a framework, but they're not gonna say you owe me $65.86. They say there's a bond payment due and the division of costs is X. And that may be subject to amendment, but and then it references back to the actual instrument that says this is what gets paid back. So it's more of a structure that's followed as opposed to a fine point of, here's, only $60, maybe $80, and it's proportional, or it's handled in a way so that these agreements are durable over the long haul and aren't subject to, okay, we got a new repayment schedule and it changed everything by $6, and now we have to go amend every agreement to change $6.
Because that might be funny, but the general obligation bonds also affect the interest rate, because you really got a commitment that you're gonna get your payment back. And anybody that wants to put their life savings into it, they know they're gonna get it back.
Right, so the way the SRF program, that's an interesting question. So the way the SRF program works is they have 3 types of borrowing that they offer. They offer borrowing at market rates, which the market rate is based on the state's bond rating, which is generally AAA or better. So for communities that can't get that type of bond rating, it's a pretty big deal. So the interest rates have a tendency to be very good. So the market rate has a tendency to be a lot better than what a lot of folks municipalities could do as one-offs on the bond market.
Sure, thank you.
They also offer subsidized financing in the Clean Water State revolving fund side of the house. It's 50% of market. So if market's 4%, when you close, you get 2%. And as we all know, the effect of interest rates on money is really, really, really vital. Another aspect of the program is disadvantaged communities aspect, where for communities that can show that they have extreme economic need, they can borrow the funds for 0% for up to 30 years. So essentially, in terms of cost of money over time, particularly with inflation, it's a negative interest rate. It's the best way to do it, right? If you can capture that funding, it is a very, very good way to do it. Projects can be broken up so that a portion of the funding can be at one interest rate or one type of the program, and another portion could be at another. There are a lot of different ways to kind of slice and dice the way the program works. But if you are borrowing the money through the Environmental Facilities Corporation, the bond that is sold to them, not on the open market. Then what they do is they take those, and I'm going to use this as a very, very, very simple way of thinking about it. They aggregate all of their borrowing into giant mega issues. They, back in 2016, 17, they had $1 billion, bond sale in August of 2016. It was the largest bond sale in the world. And they're constantly leveraging their bond, they will reaggregate and resell to continue to reduce interest rates. So when you close on an SRF market rate borrowing, your interest rate is what it is when you close. You pick your structure, which can be net level debt. There is also something called the 50% rule, which allows you to pay slightly less upfront and more in the future on a scale. But it's a good way to have a guaranteed financing rate, which allows for fiscal side of the house to do a lot of really good planning, because you know for a fact what you're going to be paying back over the course of the borrow. It's a very, very good tool.
Okay,
Thank you.
any comments? All right, any other questions on the facility plan? Comments? All right, Mary Beth, can you fill us in on the variance resubmission?
Variance resubmission. So the other document that you have is a draft of the variance resubmission of the cover letter and the response to comments. I will note, Attorney Golden pointed out that our addresses and our CC list is the old list from way long time ago, when we, I think, originally submitted this application back several years ago. So that does need to be updated. Apologize for that error. However, what you're seeing is the response to the notice of incomplete application for the variance. So the cover letter, there's a cover letter, as you may imagine. The response document itself does go through and discuss the requests that the state made and how the information that is attached is responsive to those requests. So this is all of, and then what backs this up is all of that data that we've been talking about, all those things we've been working on for well over a year. Will go in with this submission. As of, I think, just this morning, and Michael, it's nice that you are here, thank you. I think Michael provided the last information that was needed to have the, all of the paperwork for the variance to go back to the state pending staff review. So all that material needs to be reviewed. Need to make a couple updates to the cover letter, obviously, and it can be resubmitted to the state.
And then it's, if I understand correctly, that it would be, you know, this is a resubmission, so whatever gets submitted gets reviewed by the DEC. They respond back, and you may have additional things. So
That's
now you can resubmit this, they can, but in your history, your experience, you find that as you go back and forth, that it whittles down like a funnel.
It
And then
does.
you run out of stuff to say.
The issues get narrowed as we go along, absolutely. The issues get substantially narrowed. I think we're at a point where with this submission of the data and the response to comments, we're at a point where the staff at the DEC are going to be saying, okay, so they're going to need to, you know, act on your request for variance. They need to have justification for all of their decisions that they make. It's not really one decision that they're making, it's a series of decisions that they're making regarding the request for variance. So they're going to be going through this response plus the original submission and looking and saying, where is there information that we would need to be able to justify our decision tree, the decisions we intend to make? So I do anticipate that we will probably receive another letter back asking for some additional information. But again, it should be very sharply focused on the things that they need to know to support their decision-making process.
Great.
Just to remind everyone, since we've been in this for so long, the only broad variance from water quality standards that is not embodied directly in a species permit that was done as a separate program that's in New York State is the mercury variance that exists. Though that process began with a variance under this program that we have that was submitted by an applicant that then became broadly available across the states, now embedded in all the species permits. We are treading a little bit in new waters with this. That in the beginning, I think those who were involved, let's say it took the department a little time to figure out how they intended to process this request because it's new. It's something that
For the Mercury,
they had to
element.
figure out, right? So this, I would think at this point, they certainly are aware that we're going to be making this submission. They're looking forward to receiving the information. And I do believe that this next response from them will be substantially less broad, much more surgical and much more specific to, again, justify their decision tree that they have to undertake to respond to the variance.
And I just remember the notice of mercury coming up in past meetings.
Mhm.
And have we, any of the research or any of the due diligence that the group has done? Has anything been done with mercury yet, or is that, you're saying that could be the next thing?
So mercury is already here. Mercury is the precursor to this, right? So mercury, the water quality standard for mercury is 50. The water quality standard for mercury is 0.07. No one meets it.
No.
No one meets it. So the state had to come up with a variance to say, we're going to work to try to drive towards the water quality standard. In the meantime, they looked at a lot of data, just like they're doing here, and they said, we'll set a new standard that's substantially higher than the water quality standard, which is 50. And then every community who has every wastewater treatment plant is required to conduct actions to reduce the presence of mercury in the environment. So right now, Anthony, Michael, everyone that works at the wastewater treatment plant, there's a program that we undertake to try to do that, along with every other wastewater treatment plant in the state. We're saying that total dissolved solids and chloride may be heading down the same path because we're seeing total dissolved solids and chlorides in many, many, many locations in New York State. It's not just here in Harriman, it's not just in Orange County, it's very broadly being seen across the state. So again, as the Department of Environmental Conservation considers our variance, they're looking at Harriman, but they're also looking more broadly and recognizing that whatever determinations they make here, they could have broader implications across the state, like mercury, which was done.
Any comments? All right, and then you kind of touched on the draft environmental impacts statement.
So we have, that is pretty much finished. We have a few new things keep coming up that we need to include. At the moment, it is a doorstop. Could wallpaper your kitchen with it. Plan is, as soon as we have that as complete as it can be, we're going to get it to staff for review, staff and legal for review. They need to have some time to run through it before it reappears here before this committee. We do anticipate, and I know I keep saying this, but we keep discovering new things that we want to make sure that this is a comprehensive document, that we are including everything that we need to in this document. So we anticipate having that very near future to staff. When staff has been through it, we make those changes and comments are addressed. It'll come, I believe the plan is before this committee. The goal and job at the moment will be to compare the documents to the scoping document, which you may remember we adopted some time ago. It's like the table of contents for this review to make sure that everything that's in and the comments that were made on the scoping document, everything that's in that EIS is responsive to those things. Once that's the case, I believe our path is it's going to go from a recommendation in this committee to fiscal services, from fiscal services to the full legislature, who is the lead agency for seeker. And the full legislature would accept it as draft, and it's draft, and open it for public comment, be available broadly on the web for public comment. It will be sent to all of the involved agencies. We have a big list of those, and then there would also be a public comment period. We recommend conducting at least one hearing, if not hearing and some information sessions to obtain and have a written comment, maybe like an email address where people could send comments for at least 60 days for people to be able to read it, absorb it, and make comments. And then once the comment period is closed, just so everybody understands the rest of the process, all of the comments are recorded. Every comment receives a response. The responses to comments become something called a final environmental impact statement, which makes it sound like that's the end of the process. It's actually not. Final environmental impact statement is response to comments. And then the last thing that happens is a finding statement is adopted by the legislature as the agency that will discuss the process that was conducted, identify the impacts and the mitigation measures when the project goes forward, what needs to be done. That's the conclusion of the process.
But just to, and I know we say this often, but it's because it's often misunderstood by the public especially, is that this DEIS, that's when it gets completed, will go through this committee and fiscal services. And the action that you will take on that is whether or not the document is complete, which is very misleading, right? Because then people think that the process is completed, but it's not. It really means that it's ready for public review. It's complete enough that you can send it out to the public. So that's all this next step is. It's a very low bar as far as bars go throughout the DEIS process, or the EIS process. So the next real decision-making that the committees and then the full legislature will be doing on this is determining that the DEIS is complete. I prefer saying away from the word complete, saying that use the language in the regulations, which is that it's adequate for public review, which kind of sets the right bar.
at that time when we set a public hearing.
Yes.
So in the same legislative session that we would accept it as ready for public, we would also set a public hearing.
Yes.
And I think that that speaks to the language and kind of helps clarify.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Legislator Raymond.
No, I heard of, somebody help here, do we have a timetable when we're moving this at all?
We anticipate getting into staff in July, so. Sorry. Happy summer. Yes, happy summer, sorry.
And what does the staff think in terms of when we can get to the next? Just asking.
I mean, that depends. I mean, right now, our staff will be ready to do it. I mean, Jordan, I'm going to talk to your review as well. I don't know.
No, honestly, I don't see review more than 2-3 weeks.
August-ish, I think, not holding, but just gonna get in my head, yeah, and then that starts the process through here, physical services, and moves out. Could be September, the legislature, maybe, October.
I
We got budget, I'm thinking, do we get
I
ahead
think
of it?
the earliest you can see it is at the October meeting.
Okay.
That's
Avoid
the
budget.
circumstances.
What, I'm just thinking budget really cards up on us.
Well, then budget's after that, so,
Yeah. Hope that,
so it becomes a very busy month.
yes, thanks. Okay, good, thank you.
But
I
hopefully
just
on
wanna
the
feel-
legwork, it's
feel-
done ahead of time, so it shouldn't be a big deal.
Okay, Legislator Total.
You had said that we'd give it to staff July, we would potentially have it in August, correct? The committee?
Well, our review would be 2-3 weeks, assuming that there's no significant modifications that are necessary, and there may be, there's a difference of opinions. Modifications, then you're talking, and I think the chairman was correct, you're talking, if the earliest would be committees in September.
No, I'm saying it
When
would
it
come
go
to
from
this committee for the, if you're reviewing it like in beginning of July, our committee meeting is like what, August 15th?
August 22nd, July 18th.
22nd, right? Okay, so August 22nd, it would be ready for us and
I
then
would not
we,
anticipate this.
no, it would not, even if
No, I
you're
think you're
getting
saying
it in
it might be an
July.
initial review by Joe's office. And then might have to go back to Mary Beth's office.
Yeah,
for
I would imagine.
a little bit of back and forth and make sure we get it all. You know, once.
It'll be ready by September.
By September.
We're saying we're gonna put us on the October meeting.
Yeah.
We could always call a special meeting, the
Yeah.
next committee as well.
That's good, that's good.
I was just a little confused on timeline because you were saying September, but she was saying July and you're saying 2 to 3 weeks to review and.
But then once
then
they
have to
review,
get
we have to
prepared.
change it, right, so it's gotta, yeah, so it's.
We just presumed you just
Yeah.
give them a perfect document. It would take-
That's one of the reasons we're taking our time, is because we're trying to make sure that we're getting everything in there, but there's always gonna be, this thing is enormous. I know you guys are there's gonna be things, and that's okay, that's what the process is about. I think the other thing, to Attorney Golden's point, I just wanna make sure everyone understands, seeker in and of itself does not approve projects, that's not its job. It does, all it does is say, this is the environmental setting, here are the impacts, these are the mitigation measures to do the project, that's all it does. Right, so because seeker is concluded, doesn't mean that a project happens the next day. It doesn't mean that anyone, it is one step in creating a project, but there are other legal proceedings that have to be done. There's financing side of this that has to be conducted. There are a number of other steps, so just so everyone, so we don't so we understand the role of seeker in the process. It has to be done.
Yeah, and because it is there, as Mary Beth says, to inform your ultimate decision-making of undertaking, approving and financing the project, seeker has to be done before you can take any of those other steps. So it's not like we can start working on, and you can start approving the financing now, or approving the project. You can't, not allowed to do anything until seeker is really complete, which is after, as Mary Beth said, the finding statement is adopted.
Any other comments? All right, I think we're good for this meeting. Item D, I'll reach out to the municipality myself and get an update. So if anybody has anything, if not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Lori Totel. Second. Barry Cheney, second. With that, all in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Just think of the dates.
And so I'll say. Yeah.